Hello, and this is Delia again. We are on the Vampire Diaries, The Awakening, Chapter 9, Part 5.
You must be Elena,
she said.
I saw you and Stefan go out last night, and he told me your name when he came back.
You saw us? Said Elena, startled.
I didn't see you.
No, you didn't, said Miss Flowers, and she chuckled.
What a pretty girl you are, my dear, she added. A very pretty girl,
and she patted Elena's cheek. Thank you, said Elena uneasily. She didn't like the way those bird-like eyes were fixed on her. She looked past Miss Flowers to the stairs. Is Stefan home?
He must be, unless he's flown off the roof, said Mrs. Flowers, and chuckled again.
Elena laughed politely. Well, stay down here with Miss Flowers, said Meredith to Elena, while Bonnie rolled her eyes in hiding a grin. Elena nodded and mounted the stairs. Such a strange old house, she thought again, as she located the second stairway in the bedroom. The voices below were very faint from here, and as she went up the steps they faded entirely. She was wrapped in silence, and as she reached the dimly lit door at the top, she had the feeling she had entered some other world. Her knocking sounded very timid. Stefan? She could hear nothing from inside, but suddenly the door swung open. Everyone must look pale and tired today, thought Elena, and then she was in his arms. Those arms tightened about her convulsively. Elena, oh, Elena. Then he drew back. It was just the way it had been last night. Elena could feel the chasm opening between them. She saw the cold, correct look gather in his eyes. No, she said, hardly aware that she spoke aloud. I won't let you. And she pulled his mouth down to hers. For a moment there was no response, and then he shuddered, and the kiss became searing. His fingers tangled in her hair, and the universe shrank around Elena. Nothing else existed but Stefan, and the feel of his arms around her and the fire of his lips on hers. A few minutes or a few centuries later they separated, both shaking, but their gaze remained connected, and Elena saw that Stefan's eyes were too dilated for even this dim light. There was only a thin band of green around the dark pupils. He looked dazed, and his mouth, that mouth was swollen. I think he said that she could hear the control in his voice, that we had better be careful what we do when we do that. Elena nodded, dazed herself. Not in public, she was thinking, and not when Bonnie and Meredith were waiting downstairs, and not when they were obviously alone, unless... But you can just hold me, she said. How odd that after that passion she could feel so safe. So peaceful in his arms. I love you, she whispered into the rough wool of his sweater. She felt a quiver go through him. Elena, he said again, and it was a sound almost of despair. She raised her head. What's wrong with that? What could possibly be wrong with that, Stefan? Don't you love me? He looked at her helplessly, and they heard Miss Flowers' voice calling faintly from the bottom of the stairs.
Boy, Stefan!
It sounded as if she were pounding on the banister with her shoe. Stefan sighed. I better go and see what she wants. He slipped away from her, his face unreadable. Left alone, Elena folded her arms across her chest and shivered. It was so cold here. He ought to have a fire, she thought, eyes moving idly around the room to rest finally on the mahogany dresser she'd examined last night. The coffer. She glanced at the closet door. If he came back in and caught her, she really shouldn't. But she was already moving toward the dresser. Think of Bluebeard's wife, she told herself. Curiosity killed her, but her fingers were on the iron lid. Her heart beating rapidly, she eased the lid open. In the dim light, the coffer appeared at first to be empty. And Elena gave a nervous laugh. What had she expected? Love letters from Caroline? A bloody dagger? And then she saw the thin strip of silk folded over and over on itself neatly in one corner. She drew it out and ran it between her fingers. It was the apricot ribbon she'd lost the second day of school. Oh, Stephen. Tears stung her eyes, and in her chest love welled up helplessly, overflowing. That long ago. You cared about me that long ago? Oh, Stephen, I love you. And it doesn't matter if you can't say it to me, she thought. There was a sound outside the door, and she folded the ribbon quickly and replaced it in the coffer. Then she turned toward the door, blinking tears from her eyes. It doesn't matter if you can't say it right now. I'll say it for both of us, and someday you'll learn. That was interesting. Okay, so we're going on to chapter 10. That was pretty cool. So, yeah. So we'll see you soon.